Growing up, I was surrounded by raisins. We put them in everything. In salads, we ate raisin and peanut butter sandwiches, ants on a log. We ate them in trail mix, and we ate them as snacks by themselves. Really, raisins were everywhere, but I barely even noticed them or gave them a second thought because they were just there all the time. We gave them out at Halloween, and every time my grandfather came to visit, he'd bring us a big box full of them to share. It meant a lot to him, and I never understood why. But raisins were also the least exotic, least cool thing imaginable. They were a symbol of our family's humble country roots. And eventually I got sick of the raisins. It's no surprise. But as I got older, my perspective changed again. I moved to Fresno and I started thinking about what connection existed between raisins and Fresno, this city built out of nothing in the middle of a desert. What was my grandfather's role in that history? And why were they so important to him? How could such a tiny little fruit play such an outsized role in the history of agriculture in the Central Valley? I went in search of that story, and this is what I found. My history, my reason for being, my Raisin D'etre.
There was no before raisins.
You know, I mean, it was enough raisins to keep us in raisins.
Raisins were just always around. If we asked grandma or grandpa or anybody for a snack, they were handing us a pack of Champion raisins.
Raisins were given as gifts, both to us from, grandpa, obviously, but also like we would then give out raisins.
Raisins were just always a part of our family. There wasn't a time that I didn't know raisins. And then, yeah, there's a time I wish I didn't necessarily know raisins.
Other than like getting a bunch of raisins, and having them, like it was obviously part of our family story and our family identity, but I didn't really know what he did.
Raisins will always be in our diet because they are the perfect snack. Think about it. Raisins are the original gummies, and they shine in comparison. Raisins are cheaper, sweeter, and have more fiber and nutrients by weight than even vitamin gummies. Raisins are 100% natural, dried in the sun, developing antioxidants that give them a deeper flavor and a unique nutrition profile. Gummies are just artificial raisins. Grape drink to grape juice, if you will. Which one do you really want in your body? Grapes have been around for about 12 million years and grow naturally in Mediterranean climates characterized by winter rain and summer dryness, like Greece, Spain, and California. California even has native grapes, such as the Madeira grape, and Spanish missionaries grew their own varieties. Native grapes didn't taste very good, while Spanish varieties were hard to grow and both had seeds. Starting around the time of the gold rush, growers were looking for the ideal location to grow grapes on an industrial scale to make wine and grape juice, and most importantly, raisins. Why raisins? Simply put, they were the easiest, most durable, and most valuable commodity. Grapes went bad quickly, and wine was too much work. Because raisins are small and seedless, you simply need to dry them out in the sun. Unlike other fruits or nuts that take more time in processing, you can keep them forever and send them anywhere you want, as long as you keep them dry enough to prevent mold. But where to grow them? Sacramento northwards was too cool and humid. They tried raisins in Orange County, but there was a severe outbreak of Anaheim blight, later discovered to be a type of mold. So Southern California focused on citrus, Northern California grew rice and other crops, and the central San Joaquin Valley became Raisin Central. By the 1870s, growers in what is now Fresno began marketing their raisins as exotic Peruvian delights. They knew they were onto something and donated land for the creation of a train station and adjoining town to allow them to ship their raisins around the country. In 1885, this became the city of Fresno. In the decades that followed, Fresno and the Central Valley made as much of raisins as they could. There were Raisin Day parades, Raisin Day floats, car races, and even a World War I battle reenactment, as well as sales and travel specials, so everyone could arrive looking their best. Raisins quickly became the hands-down dominant crop in the area, continuing to grow throughout the 20th century. But the brown gold, like any rush for riches, had its booms and busts aplenty. The first challenge was the weather. One bad storm in late summer ruined the crop with mold. One drought year would mean a tiny crop and the prices would skyrocket. The dynamic between growers and packers was another challenge. Early on, private packing companies figured out how to farm the farmers, manipulating prices and stalling on signing contracts to the point where raisin growers would go bankrupt, even with an abundant crop. This led to the rise of cooperatives, primarily Sun-Made and the RBA, which allowed raisin growers to band together to effectively brand and market their product and avoid the pitfalls of dealing with private packers. I never really understood my family's affinity for Japanese and Armenian cultures. Every time we visited our grandparents, we could always count on a meal of shish kebab cooked by my grandfather and pilaf cooked by my grandmother. So with that in mind, I decided to invite Barlow, the chair of the Armenian Studies Department at Fresno State, to join me at AJ's Armenian Cuisine for a meal that would give me the most nostalgic flavor of my grandparents.
Really, the Western United States for Armenians, it was really the first community that developed in the late 19th century, early 1880s, when the first Armenians came to permanently settle here. And I think that development really gives Fresno a kind of signature place in the history of California Armenians, U.S. Armenians. Actually, the Armenians came from the East Coast rather than from Armenia directly.
Right. Okay.
But then they did come from Armenia, and I think they found out that this place was a place that was warmer, nice climate, good agriculture, looks like Armenia in many ways. If you look at the mountains out to the east, it looks quite a bit like Armenia. And I think they felt comfortable, and they experienced discrimination and prejudice, as did future groups. So in a way, they became kind of the first targets, and then in a way, that it was repeated, unfortunately. I think over time, it's been repeated for every immigrant group that comes in. Yeah. They had to kind of gain the acceptance, and that's at great cost sometimes, but to gain that acceptance in the community to be able to thrive. Sometimes that means not, being able to keep some of your cultural attributes. For the Armenians, though, they were able to keep those things that make them Armenian. The church is one good example, I think. Other organizations and their closeness, family closeness, all of that has kept the Armenians as a identifiable group for the foreseeable future, I think.
Next, I decided to speak with Steve Fukugawa, who could give me insight on the history of Japanese American farmers in the Central Valley. Steve Fukugawa, thank you so much for talking to me about the history of raisins in the Central Valley. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of your family?
Yeah. In 1917, my grandfather, Inezo Fukugawa, emigrated from Kumamoto, Japan, and his first place of residence was a Japanese farm labor camp in Parlir. And he worked as a laborer there for a few years, but he was also found a piece of land in 1918 and bought the first 12-acre ranch in Kingsburg area. Oh. My grandmother came in 1918 as well, and my dad was born in 1919. And he was the first of 7 children that everybody worked on the farm as they got old enough, and they would take the wooden raisin trays and set them out in the field, pick the grapes, and make the raisins. Grandpa bought the land in 1918. He had a good friend, John Otis, and the title was put in his friend's name, John Otis. And it wasn't till 1929, when my dad was 10 years old, they quit-claimed it from Mr. Otis to my dad.
That's amazing. It must have made your grandfather feel right at home in the valley.
Yes. As far as I know, I don't believe Mr. Otis took any money or anything for it. He just did it out of just friendship. And most people had some acreage of raisin grapes as well as other apricots and other fruits to try and keep the family alive. When my dad was trying to put my twin brother and I and my sister through college, instead of selling the Thompsons to the winery for juice, he would make raisins because it made a little bit more money, just enough to put us through college.
Fresno in the Central Valley is a real sort of landing place for immigrant communities to get started.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Just when Grandpa came and Parlier was a farm labor camp for Japanese, well, years later, the Mexican people started moving in, and it's primarily Mexican, Latin American that are living in Parlier. And so the next wave of laborers that will do all our work that a lot of citizens won't do anymore, they replaced the Japanese, and Filipinos have come, people from India,
Right.
all over.
Next, I spoke with Jim Ishimaru, the father of a friend of mine growing up in Oakland, who retired to the Central Valley, his family home.
While I was growing up, I was very involved in the agricultural aspects and started picking grapes and picking peaches in my very, very early ages. And when I say early, I'm talking about maybe 12 years old. There's an unexpected storm. The elementary schools would let the kids out of school, the boys, to go help farmers roll paper trays up and stack them on a trailer and get them.
Save the raisins from the
Save
rain.
the raisins from the rain getting wet. And once they get wet, they get bad. So it kind of shows you how tight the community was in support of the farmers at that time.
My grandfather, Daniel Raymond Russell, was born in 1912 in Cupertino, California. While he was growing up, his family moved around the Central Valley, from North Fork, where his father worked for the power company, to Jamestown, where the family owned a ranch, back again to Fresno, where his father worked for the power company again. And Grandpa went to Fresno High School, where he graduated at the top of his class. After high school, he went to UC Berkeley, where he earned a degree in agriculture in 1935, and returned to Fresno to marry my grandmother, Phyllis Longton. Grandma told me how they lived on the farm and sorted their coins into little tins to make sure they could pay the bills each month. Even with his degree, that was the best job he could get, and they were grateful for it. The only reason there was a job available at all was because so many migrant farm laborers were deported at the time. Still, everyone in the community worked on farms. All the immigrants and people born in the Central Valley were grateful for the opportunity to make a living in agriculture. Finally, in 1941, things started to get better. Grandpa got 2 career job offers at the same time. Bank of America wanted him to repossess failing ranches and farms on their behalf. He could obtain relatively inexpensive loans and financing while earning a salary from the bank at the same time. Alternatively, he could join the USDA and help establish a presence in California by setting up an office in Fresno for the inspection and marketing of dried fruit and nuts. So, on September 11th, 1941, Grandpa took on a new role, setting up a USDA office and began inspecting raisins. At first, it was just him in his car working from home, driving around to all the farms one at a time to talk about how to raise the quality of the raisins and keep the mold away. At this time, the USDA had just taken over agricultural inspection from the state, and there were no mandatory inspections, but there were already raisin inspectors for the state who had been convicted of bribery, as I found out through my research. Growers were asking for more attention to standards and inspections, but everyone's attention was distracted by the war and the need to produce as much food as possible. Following the war, Ray went about hiring staff and setting up the service. By the time he retired, the inspection and marketing office was up to 250 people. My father told me that when he was a young child after the war, the family moved around California, setting up satellite offices for the USDA. They spent a month in Washington, D.C., so that Grandpa could present a first-of-its-kind marketing order for raisins. After that, things were relatively quiet until raisin inspection became mandatory in 1956. Most growers and packers wanted to guarantee the quality of their raisins for consumers. But of course, there were farmers who thought inspection was pointless and unnecessary. Grandpa told me the story of a man who tried to bribe him to accept the moldy raisins with a gift card from a clothing store. It was $75, which would have been about $600 in today's money. He told me that normally he tried to keep a low profile personally and keep the USDA out of the spotlight. But this time he made a federal case out of it, literally. Grandpa made sure that all the growers and packers understood that the moldy raisins would not be tolerated. The case was tried in the federal courthouse and covered extensively in the Fresno Bee. After that, everyone understood the raisin standard would be maintained. I believe this, more than anything else, was the reason so many people felt indebted to Grandpa, and the reason we always had a plentiful supply of raisins. His generation kept their faith, kept their eyes on the prize, creating jobs and wealth through the raisin industry that built this community throughout the 20th century. When I went to AJ's to record my interview with Barlow, AJ's owner Joe introduced me to Kalen Barsarian, who turned out to be one of the most important people in the history of raisins and someone who knew my grandfather back in the 1960s. First of all, thank you so much for talking to me, Caleb. I really, really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. And honestly, by the time that we met, I didn't even think that I would be able to find anybody left around that knew my grandfather. And I'm so excited to talk to you, Caleb. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about who you are?
My name is Caleb Barsarian, born and raised in Fresno, California, 1937, 88 years old. My dad started in the raisin business in 1920. He graduated from Fresno High School in 1918, was going to be a dentist, got tuberculosis, came back, and he was hired at the largest raisin company at the time was Rosenberg, two Jewish boys from Chicago that controlled the raisin and fig and dried fruit business at that time. Uh-huh. And so I basically was born into the raisin business because the livelihood of my family came from the raisin business in California. At the time that I was the CEO of the Raisin Bargaining Association, the president of Sunmade was Frank Light. And we started out not getting along too well because I'm trying to get higher prices for the growers, and he's a marketing guy, and it took about 5 years, but I convinced him that we needed to spend more time in Washington, D.C., talking to the government, doing things that help promote California raisins for school lunch, needy persons, advertising and export. And so in 1984, a advertising company out of San Francisco named Footcone Building, they had sent their marketing guy to Fresno, and he had a earring in the left ear, and he had white shoes on, and he had a ghetto box, and he's trying to show the 17 members on the California Raisin Advisory Board how this claymation figures would work. And he turns on Heard It Through the Grapevine. 8 growers and the 8 packers and me, the 8 growers in bib overalls voted against it, not because it wasn't going to be good by Will Vinton, who created it. It was because he didn't have any socks on, he had white shoes, and he had an earring in his left ear, and he had a ghetto box. And the growers voted 8 against, the packers voted 8 for. I was left to decide, were we going to have Will Vinton, and so I voted for it. It became the most successful advertisement, one of the 50 best advertisement ever in the history of the United States. So when you look at the transition from 1964 to 2025, you've had that same kind of cycle. And you've had the different ethnic groups that have come in. You had the Volga Germans. Mm-hmm. You've had the Armenians. You've had the Japanese. Yeah. You've had the Danes. You've had all these different culture situations that came in that have created the prosperity and bust of going up and down of the raisin industry over this period of 1864 to 2025. Right. You're exactly, talking, you know, but the history is written. There's 7 books that tell you that history. And you know, like me, I've been a student of it because it's been my livelihood. Yeah. If you could grow rice in Stockton, why can't you grow rice in Fresno? Because of the Carquenes Straits and the air that comes in from the ocean and hits the Sierras and branches out. So when you look at the microclimate of each of these diverse areas, I can't grow rice in Fresno, but I could grow grapes for raisins. Muscats were the first grapes they were making into raisins, but they had a seed in it. Mm-hmm. They had to put it through a seeder. Yeah. And that went out, and the Thompsons came in, and now we're talking 100 years later, and I predict that the Thompson seedless will be an antiquated grape within 10 years. Wow. It'll all be these hybrids. It'll all be mechanical, and there'll be maybe 500 growers left of 4,000.
So now that we know that you're a Fresno boy and born into the raisin industry, Can you tell me something about how you met my grandfather?
I was hired by the Raisin Administrative Committee as an auditor in 1965. Ray Russell was a number one man for the processed products of the inspection service, and by 1965 we had a full-blown inspection of both incoming and outgoing, which was enacted into law in 1955, and Grandpa Ray was the head of the operation, and that's when we first met. Wonderful man. I'm telling you, wonderful man.
Thank you.
We connected. You know, I'm just a young kid, not too far out of college, starting out my career, and I'm going to be an auditor, doing inspections and so on with raisin packers and exporters in San Francisco and so on. And that's how I started, and how I met Grandpa, who was there to 1974 when he retired. Your grandpa implemented the Airstream sorter that Dr. Fisher built, and your grandpa implemented it, and it became the method of determining the maturity of the raisins since 1965, and it hasn't changed. It's the same machine.
Really?
It's still being used today. So what's that, 1965, 35, and 25, 60 years ago. We're still using the same machine, and it's called an Airstream sorter. We've been given such privilege living in the United States to pursue whatever we want to pursue. It's up to you. It's up to you.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I decided I wanted to be in the raisin business my whole life. I chose to stay here in this community where I felt comfortable.
Right.
As I say, as a majority of the people in here today made their fortunes in agriculture.
Now I understand why raisins were so important to my grandfather. He was proud of Fresno and the Central Valley. Our community, built in the middle of nowhere by generations of hardworking people from across the globe. If you or your family ever picked raisins to put food on the table, then you have a piece of this legacy as well. Take pride in the Central Valley. We're the community that feeds the world.
It's good. These are fresh.